Hello, and welcome back to Wise Concepts. Today's episode is part one to a two-part series on how to prepare and approach your very first game jam. In this first part, we'll be going over what you should do before even starting the game jam. I'll teach you how to get the proper Wise license for your project, how to advertise yourself to potential game jam teams, and very importantly, how to work with other programmers and GitHub. So if you're ready, let's get started. By default, your Wise project will only allow 200 assets, and you will not have access to Wise's premium plugins, like Wise Reflect. There is a very real possibility that you will not need an additional license in order to properly create sound design for your Game Jam team. However, Audiokinetic makes it very easy for Game Jam hosts to register the Game Jam so that Wise users can have unlimited access to assets and premium plugins. This means you can show off your best work with plugins that you otherwise wouldn't have access to in a smaller indie game project. First, go to Audiokinetic's website, then under the Community tab, click Events. There will be a tab for Game Jams. Depending on the popularity of the Game Jam, your Game Jam may already be listed here, in which case all you would have to do is press Request Access, then Send Request. Then you can ask the host to approve your request. If it's not listed here, then all you have to do is send the link of the Game Jam registration to your Game Jam host and ask them to include their Game Jam. After requesting access for a Game Jam license, you'll be sent an email with the license number. All you have to do is take that number and go into your Wise project. Go into Project, License Manager, then hit Paste from Clipboard. The great thing about this license is, not only does it become active a few days prior to the game jam starting so your team can prep beforehand, but it also remains active a few months after the game jam ends. That way, your team can continue to make edits to the game project as they see fit. Chances are, most game jams are going to come with some kind of forum or a Discord server for people to meet and greet, share their works, and of course, advertise and look for teams. There will be plenty of teams who are going to be in need of composers and sound designers, but there will also be plenty of composers. We, of course, have an advantage above some others because we have knowledge of directly integrating dynamic sound design with Wise, which is something that programmers will really want. So be sure to advertise that you are an audio programmer that uses Wise, as well as a composer and sound designer. It is also always a good idea to show off some of your best works. If you feel like you don't have a whole lot of sound design examples to show off like I didn't when I first started doing game jams, then feel free to make tiny Unity projects with Wise integrations to show off some of your basic skills. Many 3D game jam projects will be happy to hear changing footsteps based off the terrain and dynamic music changes, so even just having those two examples will help sell yourself in the best way possible. Thankfully, I have tutorial videos that describe how to integrate both of those concepts, which I'll link in the description. When you start using middleware software like Fmod or Wise, you suddenly change your status from simply audio designer to audio programmer. That means you are not only working with the audio team, but the programming team as well. This also means that you need a direct line to the game project, which means getting acquainted with GitHub. Speaking from experience, I know that jumping into a game project like this without any working knowledge of GitHub is a path riddled with pain and several errors. So this section, I'll go over a nice cozy way of practicing working with GitHub just by yourself. First things first, you're going to need a few additional programs. The first one being Git, and the next one being SourceTree. SourceTree is the program that we'll be using to communicate between our computer's files and GitHub's repository files. This is how you will pull the game project from your developer's repository and push your Wise work over to them. So go ahead and get those two programs downloaded, then we'll move on. And as a last thing, obviously it would be easiest for you to practice with yourself if you have two computers. In this instance, I'll be using my desktop and my laptop. But if you don't have two computers at your disposal, you'll have to continuously switch between your GitHub and SourceTree accounts, which can get a bit confusing. Speaking of which, you'll need two GitHub accounts in order to follow along with this part. So right now, I'm on my laptop and I'm acting as the role of main developer and programmer. I'm starting in GitHub and I'm going to make a new repository. You can name it however you like and, of course, give it an appropriate description. The next part is fairly important. Check add.gitignore. This is the file that tells GitHub you will ignore these files whenever we push them to you. There are some files that Unity produces that are simply for you as the user, but won't be needed for anyone taking the project from GitHub. That's why the .gitignore is important. Now normally, figuring out which files you'd want to ignore could take some time, but thankfully GitHub has a template for Unity projects. Very useful. Select the Unity template, then hit Create Repository. You'll be brought to your new repository, which should only have your .gitignore. That's all we need to do in GitHub for now. Let's open up Source Tree now. Go to File, Clone New, or hit Ctrl N. For the source path, you're just going to copy and paste the URL of your GitHub repository. Then for the destination path, I'm going to make my own folder in my Unity folder. This folder has to be empty, otherwise SourceTree won't accept it. Hit clone. Now it's finally time to make our Unity project. Take note of which version of Unity you're using because it should be identical to the version you're using on your other computer. Make the project however you like, but I'm going to make a simple 3D project. Once all the assets load and the project opens up, I'm going to close my project. Then, I'm going to look for the folder of that project and copy-paste all of its contents into the folder that I made into SourceTree. Once you do that, we no longer need our original Unity project, so you can go ahead and delete it. Now let's head back to SourceTree. Next to the plus commit button, there should now be a number. This indicates that changes have been made to your folder. Press the plus button, then click Stage All. Basically, these will be all of the changes we're going to push to GitHub. Now that those are all staged, go down and make an appropriate description. Since all we did is just incorporate Unity, I'm just going to write initial Unity commit. Then, I'm going to hit the commit button on the lower right corner. This shouldn't take long. Once that's complete, we're going to go up to the top, and you'll notice that there's a number next to the push button. This means that we've committed something to the source tree, but we haven't yet pushed the changes to GitHub. For practice, let's push it now. This should take a little bit. After that finishes processing, let's head back to our Unity project. Now it's time to actually design a game. Of course, since this is practice, you can be as little or as much detailed as you would like to be. For now, I'm just going to add a plane as a ground, color it with a green material, then I'm going to head into the Unity store to import in my favorite standard assets for Unity. Gotta have that first-person controller. Then I'm going to drag in a couple of pillars and a little floor piece to act as an overhang. Then I'm going to drag in the first-person character, making sure to delete the default main camera since the first-person controller already has one attached to it. So as a developer, what I want is for the music to play immediately as the game starts and for it to play a normal theme on one side of this archway and a spooky theme on another side of this archway. So let's get our audio programmer involved. Before going to SourceTree, make sure that you saved your project. Otherwise, the changes on your scene will not show for your audio programmer. Let's head back into SourceTree. Again, hit the plus commit button, stage all of the changes, make an appropriate description of what you did in the project, the more detailed the better, and hit commit. Then once again, hit the push button to push your changes up to GitHub. Once that finishes pushing, head back to GitHub and refresh the page. You should now see that all of the changes you made are now officially here. If not, make sure that you properly pushed your changes from SourceTree. Now we need to add a new collaborator. Go to Settings, then to the Manage Access. I'm going to add in my good friend, who is an amazing composer. He'll get the job done. Now I'm on my desktop, acting as the main audio programmer now. Usually, you'll be making changes at the same pace as the main programmer, so with this first major gameplay commit, now it's time to add in some music. Go into your email where you'll find an invite to our new GitHub. Accept the invitation and go inside of the repository. The first thing you're going to want to do is make yourself a branch. What's useful with a branch is you can make as many changes in your own personal branch without risk of interfering or screwing with the main branch. Then, once all appropriate changes are made, you can merge your personal branch with the main branch. To do this, hit the main branch button and start typing something into the field. This could be your name, your role, or any identifier to show that this is your branch. Then hit the Create Branch from Main button. Once that's done, let's head into SourceTree and clone the project just like we did as the main programmer. We only have one minor difference this time. File, Clone New, copy-paste the URL from GitHub, and make a new destination path in an empty folder. Now we're going to go into our advanced options and ensure that the checkout branch is the branch that we just made. For me, it's Character Composer, so that's correct. Hit Clone. These will now copy all of those files from GitHub into that empty folder. So, if we open Unity from that folder, we should theoretically have the same game as we left it on my laptop. Let's test it out real quick. Everything seems to check out so far, which means we have successfully transferred all of the proper data from one computer to another. Now that everything transferred correctly, let's integrate Wwise into our project. Close Unity and head into Wwise. Go into the Unity tab and hit Integrate Wwise into Project for the game project that we just set up. If you plan on using any plugins in this project, now would be the time to include them. After that's done processing, let's go ahead and push the changes to GitHub. It is always safer to push to GitHub frequently. Stage all the changes, give the commit a description, commit the changes, then finally push the changes to GitHub. Again, this initial commit should take a little while. Once that finishes pushing, let's finally open up the project in Wwise. For the most part, I'm going to do the exact same thing I did in my first Widget short video, where I talked about vertical interactive music. Most of the things I do right now will be described in detail in that video if you would like to check it out. However, there is one major difference. Before I make my sound bank and send it off to Unity, I'm going to go into my music switch container and into the conversion tab. Hit the edit button for the default conversion settings. In short, we want to make our project as small as possible, and music can be quite large. So these conversion settings will take our large audio files and convert them to something much smaller without doing too much to sacrifice on quality. Scroll all the way to the right until you see the format. We want to switch this to Vorbis, which is a nice compromise between file size and quality. And just to make sure that these files are small enough to meet a project's size budget, I'm going to change the quality to 2. Now go ahead and hit the convert button. Depending on how many assets you have in your project already, this could take a while. Once that's done, take a brief look at the original size of your files, then the converted size. It's a massive difference. For me, it brought my file size down to roughly 4% of its original size. That'll fit much more nicely in GitHub and our project. Now that that's done, you can generate your sound bank and save your game like normal. Make sure to exit out of Wwise, as Wwise creates files that are solely only available when Wwise is open, and some of them can be quite large. You don't want those committed to GitHub. Go into source tree, commit your changes, and push them to GitHub. Let's now hop into Unity, refresh the project, and generate the sound banks. Just like in my Widget short video, I'm going to add in an AK bank, an AK event to play the music, and a couple of trigger boxes so that we can transition from the normal music to the spooky music and back to normal. Once you're done making your changes, save the project and test it out. That sounds pretty good. Enough to send back to our main programmer. If you haven't already, save your Unity project, commit your changes, and push it back to GitHub. So this would be alright on its own, except you only just pushed to your personal branch. You need to merge it to the main branch now so that the main developer can work with it. On the left side under Remote Branches, you'll find the main branch along with the rest of your team's branches. Go ahead and double click on the main branch in order to check out the main branch. Once you do this, you may or may not notice that you'll have things you need to commit. If you do, then go ahead and commit them. If you don't, then let's go ahead and hit this merge button on the top bar. From here, you'll be able to select any of the past commits to merge into the main branch. We, of course, want to merge our most recent commit. Click on that, then hit OK. Once the merge is complete, you'll now be able to push all of the changes to GitHub. And that's all there is to it. Let's head back to the main programmer and see if everything transferred alright. Once you have confirmed that the audio programmer has submitted their changes in GitHub, you can go into source tree. Pull all the changes from the main branch just like you did before. Now let's head into Unity, which will take a moment to pull in all the changes to the folder. Once that's done, you'll now notice that all the changes you made as an audio programmer are now properly set into the project. Let's test it out to make sure that sounds okay. Everything seems to check out. You have now gone through one full cycle working with both SourceTree and GitHub. Feel free to do this as many times as you would like in order to really get the hang of working with them. And that's it for part 1 of this video. Part 2 will be released next Thursday and will describe basic methodologies on how to work with other programmers and some basic techniques on how to parse through scripts in order to figure out where your Wwise scripts belong. We'll also discuss some Wwise-related errors so you can help the other programmers with some basic audio problems. But until then, I wish you luck in preparing for your next game jam, and I'll see you next Thursday.